It was March, and I was staying in a remote hunting lodge near Boundary Waters, Michigan. The wilderness was locked in winter's grip, with snow piled high against the trees and ice coating every surface like glass. The lodge itself was a two-room structure with a main living area, a sleeping loft, and large windows that overlooked the frozen expanse of Silver Lake. It was isolated here, completely isolated, but that was exactly what I wanted. The remoteness of the place offered a perfect escape for some winter photography, away from the chaos of city life. I spent my first day hiking the perimeter of the lake, capturing shots of frozen waterfalls and snow-laden pines. There were no sounds except for the crunch of my boots on snow and the occasional crack of ice shifting on the lake. The cold air burned my lungs, but it was refreshing. It was easy to lose yourself in the beauty of it all, to forget that civilization existed beyond these woods. As the afternoon light began to fade, painting the snow in shades of orange and purple, I felt completely at peace. My first day had been productive and calm. I had no idea what was waiting for me. The next morning, I woke to find the temperature had dropped significantly overnight. My breath fogged inside the lodge despite the propane heater running full blast. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the frozen lake. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints in the snow leading from the tree line directly to the lodge. The prints weren't there yesterday when I'd returned from my hike. The trail was too fresh, too clear. The footprints circled the entire perimeter of the lodge, stopping at each window, as if someone had been inspecting every entry point. And then they led away, back into the forest, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. I felt my pulse quicken. I grabbed my camera and zoomed in on the prints through the telephoto lens. They were large, made by heavy boots, and the stride pattern suggested someone tall, maybe 6 feet or more. My hands shook as I reviewed the photos. Whoever made these tracks had been here while I slept. They'd walked around my lodge, looked through my windows, studied the place. And I'd been completely unaware, vulnerable and alone. I immediately checked all the doors and windows, making sure they were locked. My phone had no signal out here. I'd known that before coming, part of the appeal of true isolation. But now that isolation felt like a trap. I decided to pack up and leave. This didn't feel right. Something about those footprints, the deliberate way they circled the building, felt predatory. But when I went to my truck parked beside the lodge, I found all 4 tires slashed. Clean cuts, precise, done with a sharp blade. Someone wanted me stranded here. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked around the clearing. The forest surrounded me on all sides, dark and impenetrable. Whoever did this could be watching right now, hidden among the trees, waiting. I ran back inside and barricaded the door with the heavy wooden table. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away through dense forest and deep snow. Even if I hiked out, I'd be exposed, vulnerable. I decided to wait it out, stay inside until morning, then attempt the hike to safety. The day passed in agonizing slowness. I kept watch at the windows, scanning the tree line for any movement. Nothing. Just wind and snow and silence. As darkness fell, I built up the fire in the stone fireplace and kept all the lights off, not wanting to advertise my presence. At 11 p.m., I heard it. A sharp crack echoed across the frozen lake. Then another. Then another. They were rhythmic, deliberate. Someone was breaking through the ice with an axe or a pickaxe. The sound was coming from directly in front of the lodge, maybe 100 yards out on the frozen lake. I crept to the window and peered through the gap in the curtains. In the moonlight, I could see a dark figure standing on the ice, swinging something heavy downward, breaking through the frozen surface. They were creating a hole, methodically, purposefully. My mind raced. Why would someone be breaking ice in the middle of the night? What were they planning? Then the figure stopped. They stood perfectly still for a long moment, and then slowly turned to face the lodge. Even from this distance, I could feel their gaze on me. They knew I was watching. The figure raised one hand and waved. A slow, deliberate wave. Mocking. Confident. Then they walked toward the shore, toward the lodge, their footsteps crunching through the snow. I backed away from the window, my breath coming in short gasps. I grabbed the hunting rifle I'd brought for bear protection, checking to make sure it was loaded. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The footsteps grew closer. They weren't trying to be quiet now. Heavy boots on the wooden porch, walking the length of it, testing the boards. Then silence. I held my breath, listening. Where were they? A knock at the door. 3 slow, measured knocks. Then a voice, female, young-sounding. Hello? Is anyone there? Please, I need help. My car broke down on the access road. I've been walking for hours. I'm freezing. Please. It sounded genuine. Desperate. But something felt wrong. Why would anyone be out here at midnight? Why didn't I hear a car engine? And that figure on the ice, that had been bigger, moved differently. I'm sorry, I called through the door. I can't help you. There's no cell service here, and my truck is broken down too. You should keep walking to the ranger station. It's another 2 miles east on the main road. Silence. Then the voice changed. Deeper, harsher, angry. I know you're in there, Marcus. I've been watching you. I know you're alone. My blood turned to ice. How did they know my name? I hadn't told anyone at the lodge rental office, had paid cash, used a fake name on the reservation. No one should know who I was. The doorknob rattled violently. Then stopped. Footsteps moved away from the door, circling the lodge again. I tracked the sound, following it with the rifle aimed at the wall. They were testing each window, checking the locks, looking for a way in. Then I heard scraping above me. On the roof. They'd climbed up somehow, and now they were moving across the shingles. The metal stovepipe rattled. They were trying to come down the chimney. I quickly doused the fire, plunging the room into darkness lit only by moonlight. Smoke poured out of the fireplace as the damper was forced open from above. A flashlight beam shot down through the chimney, illuminating the room. Found you, Marcus, the voice called down, echoing in the flue. You can't hide from me. I've been planning this for months. Ever since you took those photos. Photos? What photos? I was a nature photographer. I'd never photographed anyone without permission. This person had me confused with someone else. Or they were insane. Or both. The beam of light disappeared, and I heard boots landing on the roof again. They were moving to the loft window, the only window I hadn't locked because I couldn't reach it without a ladder. I heard glass breaking. They were coming in. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my backpack with my camera equipment, threw on my winter coat, and ran for the back door. I unlocked it as quietly as possible and slipped out into the freezing night. The temperature had dropped to what felt like 10 below zero. The wind cut through my coat like knives. I could hear them inside the lodge now, moving through the rooms, searching. I ran toward the tree line, my boots sinking into deep snow with each step. Behind me, I heard the back door slam open and a shout. They'd seen me. I crashed through the forest, branches whipping my face, snow filling my boots. My lungs burned from the cold air. Behind me, I could hear them giving chase, crashing through the underbrush, gaining on me. I had the rifle, but I couldn't stop to aim, couldn't risk a confrontation. I just ran, following the old logging road I'd seen on my first day, praying it would lead me to the main highway. The moonlight barely penetrated the forest canopy. I ran blind, stumbling over hidden roots and fallen branches. My pursuer was relentless, never slowing, never giving up. I could hear their breathing, harsh and steady, much too close. Then I saw lights ahead. The main highway. I burst out of the tree line onto the shoulder of the road, waving my arms frantically at an approaching semi-truck. The truck's air brakes hissed as it slowed, and the driver leaned out, looking concerned. You okay, buddy? What are you doing out here? Call the police, I gasped. Someone's chasing me. They broke into the lodge. The driver pulled out his CB radio while I climbed into the cab, watching the tree line. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then I saw them. A figure standing just inside the shadows of the forest, watching. They stood there for a full minute, then slowly raised their hand in that same mocking wave. Then they turned and disappeared into the darkness. The state police arrived 20 minutes later. They found the lodge broken into, my belongings scattered, but no sign of my pursuer. They found the hole chopped in the ice on the lake. They found something else too. My truck, parked a mile up the logging road, all 4 tires slashed but something written in the snow beside it. I'll find you again. The detective who interviewed me asked about my work, my life, if I had any enemies. I told him I was a freelance photographer, mostly landscapes and wildlife. Nothing controversial. Nothing that would make someone target me. He showed me photos they'd found in the lodge, photos I'd never taken. Images of people, candid shots, taken from a distance. They looked like surveillance photos. These yours? He asked. No. I've never seen those before. Someone must have planted them. He nodded slowly. The prints we found match a person of interest in several missing persons cases across Minnesota and Wisconsin. All photographers who rented remote cabins for winter shoots. 3 victims so far. You're lucky you got away. Lucky. That's what he called it. But as I sat in that police car, wrapped in a blanket, watching them process the crime scene, I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. Because whoever that was, they knew my name. They knew things about me they shouldn't have known. And they'd promised to find me again. That was 5 years ago. I still do photography, but I never work alone anymore. I never rent remote cabins. And I never, ever go anywhere without cell service. Because sometimes I still feel them watching. Sometimes I see footprints in the snow that shouldn't be there. And sometimes late at night, I hear 3 slow knocks on my door. But I never answer. Because I know who's on the other side, waiting patiently for me to make one mistake. And next time, I might not be lucky enough to escape. I had the rifle, but I couldn't stop to aim, couldn't risk a confrontation. I just ran, following the old logging road I'd seen on my first day, praying it would lead me to the main highway. The moonlight barely penetrated the forest canopy. I ran blind, stumbling over hidden roots and fallen branches. My pursuer was relentless, never slowing, never giving up. I could hear their breathing, harsh and steady, much too close. Then I saw lights ahead. The main highway. I burst out of the tree line onto the shoulder of the road, waving my arms frantically at an approaching semi-truck. The truck's air brakes hissed as it slowed, and the driver leaned out, looking concerned. "You okay, buddy? What are you doing out here?" "Call the police," I gasped. "Someone's chasing me." They broke into the lodge. The driver pulled out his CB radio while I climbed into the cab, watching the tree line. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then I saw them. A figure standing just inside the shadows of the forest, watching. They stood there for a full minute, then slowly raised their hand in that same mocking wave. Then they turned and disappeared into the darkness. The state police arrived 20 minutes later. They found the lodge broken into, my belongings scattered, but no sign of my pursuer. They found the hole chopped in the ice on the lake. They found something else too. My truck, parked a mile up the logging road, all 4 tires slashed, but something written in the snow beside it. "I'll find you again." The detective who interviewed me asked about my work, my life, if I had any enemies. I told him I was a freelance photographer, mostly landscapes and wildlife. Nothing controversial. Nothing that would make someone target me. He showed me photos they'd found in the lodge, photos I'd never taken. Images of people, candid shots, taken from a distance. They looked like surveillance photos. "These yours?" he asked. "No. I've never seen those before. Someone must have planted them." He nodded slowly. "The prints we found match a person of interest in several missing persons cases across Minnesota and Wisconsin. All photographers who rented remote cabins for winter shoots. 3 victims so far. You're lucky you got away." Lucky. That's what he called it. But as I sat in that police car, wrapped in a blanket, watching them process the crime scene, I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. Because whoever that was, they knew my name. They knew things about me they shouldn't have known. And they'd promised to find me again. That was 5 years ago. I still do photography, but I never work alone anymore. I never rent remote cabins. And I never, ever go anywhere without cell service. Because sometimes I still feel them watching. Sometimes I see footprints in the snow that shouldn't be there. And sometimes late at night, I hear 3 slow knocks on my door. But I never answer. Because I know who's on the other side, waiting patiently for me to make one mistake. And next time, I might not be lucky enough to escape. It was a merciless night in February 2023 when I, Tyler, a college dropout trying to make ends meet, found myself navigating through a blizzard that had turned the roads into death traps. Uber Eats had seemed like decent money when I'd started 3 months ago, and tonight the multiplier was insane, 4.5x surge pricing. Most drivers had called it quits hours earlier, but I was still grinding, chasing one last delivery that promised a $75 tip. The kind of tip that would cover my electric bill. The order pinged from a Chinese restaurant way out in the outskirts of Cleveland, headed to a location I didn't recognize. One of those addresses that barely showed up on the map, somewhere in the industrial district where old factories sat rotting and the few remaining residents lived in converted warehouses. The snow was coming down in sheets so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My headlights cut through the white curtain like weak flashlight beams, and ice was forming on my windshield faster than my defroster could melt it. I had to pull over twice just to scrape the glass clean enough to see. Every instinct told me to cancel the order, turn around, go home. But $75. That tip was calling to me like a siren song. The GPS led me deeper into the industrial zone, past chain-link fences and abandoned loading docks. Street lights were sparse out here, and half of them were broken. The buildings looked like hulking corpses in the darkness, their broken windows like empty eye sockets staring at nothing. I passed a playground that looked like it hadn't seen children in 20 years, the swings creaking in the wind, moving on their own. My phone's signal flickered, the GPS lagging, and for a moment I thought I'd lost the route entirely. But then it recalibrated and pointed me down a narrow road that looked more like an alley. The buildings here were older, made of brick and stone, some of them partially collapsed. At the end of the road sat my destination, a 3-story warehouse converted into residential units. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. The building was dark except for a single light on the second floor, a sickly green glow that reminded me of those old fluorescent bulbs in hospital hallways. The front door was propped open with a brick, snow drifting inside onto a stained concrete floor. I grabbed the food and stepped out into the wind. The cold hit me like a physical force, stealing my breath, making my eyes water. The snow had piled up at least 8 inches, and I had to wade through it to reach the entrance. As I got closer, I noticed something odd about the building. The windows were covered from the inside, not with curtains or blinds, but with what looked like black garbage bags and duct tape. The kind of coverage someone uses when they don't want anyone seeing in or out. I stood at the threshold, looking into the dark interior. The customer had specified in the delivery notes, Apartment 2B. Door will be unlocked. Please bring food to kitchen counter. Cannot come to door. Will tip extra $25 cash for bringing it up. An extra $25 on top of the $75 already promised. $100 total for one delivery. That was more than I'd made in an entire 8-hour shift last week. But something felt wrong. The darkness beyond that open door seemed to breathe. I could hear the wind howling through the building, whistling through broken windows and empty corridors. And underneath that, something else. A mechanical humming, like old machinery running somewhere deep inside. I should have left the food at the door and walked away. That was the smart move. That was the safe move. But $100. My mind did the calculation automatically. Rent was due in 5 days. I was already $200 short. This tip would save me. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and exposed pipes. The floor was concrete, cracked, and stained with things I didn't want to identify. On the walls, someone had spray-painted strange symbols, not gang tags or graffiti art, but something else. Geometric shapes, circles with lines through them, patterns that hurt to look at too long. I stepped inside. The door was supposed to be on the second floor, so I looked for stairs. I found them at the end of the hall, a metal staircase that groaned under my weight. Each step echoed in the silence, announcing my presence to whoever or whatever was up there. The second floor was colder than the first, which made no sense. Heat rises. It should have been warmer. But my breath came out in visible clouds, and frost was actually forming on the walls. The mechanical humming was louder up here, a steady rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Apartment 2B was at the far end of the corridor. The door stood ajar, just a few inches, enough to see that the lights were off inside. A faint smell drifted out, something sweet and rotten, like meat left out too long, mixed with industrial cleaner. I knocked. Delivery. I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak in the cold. No response. Hello. I have your food. I'm leaving it outside the door. Still nothing. But then from deep within the apartment, I heard movement. Not footsteps. Something being dragged across the floor, heavy and slow. And breathing. Labored, wet breathing like someone struggling with fluid in their lungs. Come in, a voice finally answered. Male, hoarse, strained. Can't get to the door. Hurt my leg. Bring it to the kitchen. Please. So hungry. The way he said hungry made my skin crawl. There was something wrong with the emphasis, the way his voice dropped and stretched the word out. I can just leave it here, I said, already setting the bag down. Please. The voice was closer now, just beyond the doorway. Need help. Fell down. Phone dead. You're the first person, in days. Please help me. Days? If he'd been trapped here for days, why wouldn't he crawl to the door? Why wouldn't he call 911 before his phone died? Why order Chinese food instead of calling for medical help? But even as these thoughts raced through my mind, my hand was already pushing the door open wider. Maybe I wanted to believe him. Maybe I wanted that $100 badly enough to ignore every warning sign. Maybe I'm just an idiot. The apartment was pitch black. My flashlight beam swept across a large open space, one of those loft-style conversions where they knocked down all the interior walls. Exposed brick, old wooden beams in the ceiling, industrial windows covered with those black bags I'd seen from outside. And plastic. Everywhere. The floor was covered in thick plastic sheeting, the kind painters use, secured at the edges with duct tape. The plastic crinkled under my feet as I stepped inside. Just like in that Dexter show. The thought appeared unbidden, and once it was there, I couldn't shake it. The smell was stronger inside. That sweet rot mixed with bleach, so strong it made my eyes water. "Where are you?" I called out, moving my flashlight around the space. "Kitchen," the voice answered. "In the back." I moved forward slowly, my boots crunching on the plastic. The beam of my flashlight picked out details. A folding table against one wall with fast food wrappers piled on it. A dirty mattress in the corner with dark stains on it. Tools scattered on the floor. A hacksaw, bolt cutters, a drill. Not renovation tools. Wrong kinds of tools. My flashlight found the kitchen area. Industrial sink, old appliances, more plastic sheeting. And there, in the shadows past my light's reach, a figure hunched on the floor. I could see the outline, someone sitting, back against the wall, one leg stretched out. "I'm going to leave the food here," I said, my voice shaking now. "I'm leaving it right here on the counter." "Closer," the voice said. "Can't reach. Leg's broken. Please." I took one more step. My flashlight beam finally reached the figure clearly, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. He wasn't sitting. He was crouching, like an animal ready to pounce. And his leg wasn't broken or stretched out. He was positioned on the balls of his feet, weight distributed, ready to spring. I could see his face now, not injured, not helpless. Alert. Focused. Predatory. His eyes caught my flashlight beam and reflected it back at me, bright and wrong. And behind him, I saw another figure. This one standing much larger, holding something long and metallic. Something that gleamed in my flashlight beam. I didn't think. I just dropped everything and ran. The food hit the floor, the bags splitting open, containers spilling out. Behind me, I heard both of them move, footsteps pounding on plastic, moving fast, too fast. I hit the doorway at full speed, and nearly fell as my boots slipped on something wet on the floor. I caught myself on the doorframe and kept running, not looking back, not thinking, just moving. The staircase shook as I took the steps 3 at a time. Behind me they were coming. I could hear them on the metal stairs, the clanging echoing through the building. I burst out the front door into the blizzard and ran for my car. The snow was deeper now, slowing me down, my legs burning as I pushed through it. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't get my key fob to work. The car wouldn't unlock. I pressed the button again and again, nothing. Behind me, the building's front door stood open, and I could see shadows moving inside, getting closer. Finally, the car chirped and unlocked. I threw myself inside and hit the lock button, starting the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. As I threw the car into reverse, I saw them in my headlights. 2 figures standing in the doorway, watching me. The smaller one raised a hand, not waving, just acknowledging. Like this was all routine. Like I wasn't the first to run. I drove away too fast, fishtailing on the ice, not caring, just needing to get away from that place. I called 911 once I had cell service again, my voice barely coherent as I tried to explain what happened. The police met me at a gas station 20 minutes later. They went to the warehouse that night, a full tactical unit. They found the building, found apartment 2B. They found the plastic sheeting, the tools, the stains on the mattress. They found the walk-in freezer in the back that I never saw, the one that was running, humming, the source of that mechanical sound I'd heard. They found 3 bodies inside that freezer. 3 people who hadn't escaped like I did. The detective who interviewed me later said I was lucky. Said the setup was professional, practiced. Said they'd probably been operating for months, maybe longer, luring delivery drivers with big tips, isolated locations, sob stories about being hurt. He asked me why I went inside. I told him about the $100 tip, about my rent being due, about making a stupid choice because I was desperate. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "That's how they get people. They know exactly which buttons to push. You're not stupid. You're just human." But I felt stupid. I felt stupid for falling for it, for ignoring every warning sign, for almost becoming victim number 4 because I needed money. I quit Uber Eats that night. Quit and deleted the app. I got a job at a warehouse during the day, normal hours, normal people. It pays less, but I'm alive to collect it. Sometimes I still dream about that apartment. About the plastic sheeting, the smell, the figure crouching in the shadows. about how close I came to not walking out of there. And I wonder about the other drivers who took those deliveries. The ones who weren't as lucky. The ones whose last thought was probably the same as mine. Just one more delivery. Just one more tip. Then I'm done for the night. I almost died for $100 that I never got. But at least I lived to regret it. That's more than 3 other people can say.